On today's Transport Evolved, Tesla drops the Model E name, US deliveries of the i3 start, and the two EV wars rage on. These stories and more coming up next on Transport Evolved. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode number 199 of Transport Evolved, recorded on Friday, May 9th, 2014. My name is Nikki Gordon-Bloomfield.
And I'm Mark Chatterley. How are you today, Nikki?
I'm very good. I'm very good indeed. Do you notice anything?
You appear to be wearing a new shiny top.
Transport Evolved logo. Oh, yeah.
Oh, very
Not
nice.
that you can see it.
It looks good. I'm impressed. Well, I'm going to pretend I can see it. It looks good. I'm very impressed. It's a very snazzy top, and I want one.
You're very, very kind. This includes, we also have some Transport Evolved staff gear. So does that mean we're now a proper company and stuff? Not quite yet, but we're working on it. We also have some... Sorry?
We're going to have badges and logos.
Yeah, I know.
And bean bags.
I know. And we've got hoodies already. And we've got those, those things that you get at the side of the road, like workman wear. We've got some of those.
High-vis jackets.
Yeah, high-vis jackets with our name on it as well. Cool or what? Cool or what? And we also have this, which I'm going to show you. That is the car design for our very own Mr. Hiro Nakamura for coverage of the Wave this year. Brilliant!
Very
it's going to
cool.
be fantastic. I'm really excited. I'm really, really, really excited. I've just noticed I've got this massive scratch on my face in the camera. I don't know where it's come from. So I'm pleading ignorance. Joining us today on the show is the wonderful Mr. Mark Geller, all the way from wonderful, wonderful San Francisco. How are you today, Mark?
Fine, thank you. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Good evening.
So how is the hilly part of San Francisco?
How is the hilly part of San Francisco?
Well, you kind of live at the bottom of the hilly part, right?
I do live at the bottom of a hilly part. Most people live at the bottom of a hilly part, and some people live on the hills.
Yeah.
All's well. Sunny day.
Hang on. Are you in San Francisco? Sunny San Francisco?
It is sunny at the moment. I don't expect it to last more than a couple of hours.
For those who visit San Francisco regularly will know that San Francisco likes its fog and its mist. There we go. We've got some great stories lined up for you today to talk about. But Mark, what have you been up to lately?
What have I been up to? Not a lot. Is there something specific I've been up to that you know about?
Just wondering how everybody is.
No. Unfortunately, I went and visited my parents at the weekend and went for a barbecue. That was good.
I unfortunately went to visit my parents. Was that a Freudian slip?
I didn't say unfortunately. I said
did.
I did I?
Yes.
I might have. I may have. It was good. I had a good time, and I had some alcohol, which is a very rare treat for me. So I was very happy.
Mr. Geller, how have you been?
Very well, thank you. All's good. Working on various plug-in stuff. Thinking about National Plug-in Day.
Yeah, tell us about that, because it's the first time Plug-in Day is not actually a day anymore. It's a week.
It's a week, and I should have said National Drive Electric Week. So organizing is beginning. Looking for more captains, hoping to double the number of cities that are involved. Quite exciting.
Well, look, we'll get together with you guys and we'll make sure something happens in the UK. That's what we'll try and do. So let's go on with the stories from the week. First up, Tesla announced its Q1 profits this week, or losses, depending on how you look at it. And there was some interesting information contained therein, wasn't there, Mr. Chatterley?
There was. Well, I like, firstly, like you say, the way you measure it. I quite like. They have, because we always do the story. There's the gap method, GAAP, and the non-GAAP. And it leaves me not knowing exactly where Tesla is with their finances, because on the one hand, the standard approved measure is saying they're losing money, it's terrible, and then their own measure is like, no, we got tons of money, don't worry, everything's fine.
Yes.
And it just utterly confuses me.
Okay, so this is how it works, and I'm going to get shot down in flames now. And Mark Geller, if you know differently, please tell me. GAAP, the generally accepted accounting principle, kind of just takes into account money that you actually have. So you can't say, yeah, but I'm selling this to somebody and they're going to pay me over the next 5 years for it. It's the money that you actually have, not money that you're going to be getting from, that you've been promised. And it also takes into other accounts, other things that it doesn't take into account, other things which can result in companies like Tesla appearing to still be losing money. If you look at it that way, Tesla lost 50 million in Q1 of 2014, which is about 40 cents per share. If you look at the non-generally accepted accounting principles, which includes things like money from cars that Tesla have sold but haven't yet got all the money from because they've either been on lease or the what do they call it? The guaranteed revenue resale value program, and also from converted share notes, etc., etc., etc. Then Tesla is actually making made $17 million of profit in Q1, and that's equivalent to an earnings per share of 12 cents. Now, Wall Street said it was only expected Tesla to only earn 10 cents per share. So actually, Tesla did better than Wall Street. So excellent. Smiles all round. But the really interesting news, obviously, Tesla is expanding massively at the moment. That's one of the reasons why it didn't do so well in its financials this time around, because it's spending a huge amount of money on expanding the empire. I mean, its company. And therefore, you're seeing, Tesla spending hundreds of millions of dollars on expanding service centers, showrooms, putting cars in new markets, things like the right-hand drive development for the Tesla Model S, which goes on sale in the UK next month. It's going to be the first market for the right-hand drive Tesla Model S, so it's had to spend a lot of money on homologation and getting the car ready. And also hiring new staff. Obviously, the Tesla Gigafactory investment, although it's not even started to be built yet, there are large sums of money being spent by Tesla for that at the moment. Production by the end of this year is predicted to be 1,000 cars a week, which is phenomenal. But that's nowhere near the kind of volumes yet that a lot of mainstream automakers have. So it shows that Tesla still has a long way to go. But the really interesting thing is groundbreaking at the Tesla Gigafactory, one of the Gigafactory sites, will happen next month. Mark Geller, what do you think of this all?
Well, I think I'm not competent to really discuss the financials or how people interpret it. I know that there are financial analysts who, remain obviously very bullish, and there are those who are talking down Tesla, and it's they're finding problems. I think one can find optimism or pessimism as one likes. I think what's clear is that Tesla is doing an awesome job, and if they can both meet demand, which does appear to be happening, and continue to see increased demand, they're going to rely on these rather expensive cars for the next few years. Hopefully, we'll get more information over time on plans and dates for the next car. It'll be very interesting. I don't think it's probably worth it for those of us interested in the car to get too involved in the financial interpretations, analyses, and whatever of the company. Right. I don't have the means to make that kind of.
And I'm not a financial analyst either. In fact, I run screaming from matters of finance, as Mark will tell you, because we've had some financially related discussions this week, haven't we, Mark? And I've just run screaming from them. All right, so take from that what you will. Dennis in the chat room is saying that there's also some chatter about some of the money that had to be spent on charging cables for the UK as well, and some of the development that went into that for making it ready for the UK market. So all of those little incidentals that are coming, and GAAP accounting principles are kind of the agreed ones worldwide, so that accountants from any country can look at it and go, yes, this book makes sense. So it's kind of like a worldwide standard. Moving on to the second story, BMW i3 deliveries absolutely leaped into dealerships and onto the road. Now, if you think of any electric car launch to this date, so think of the Nissan Leaf, Chevy Volt, even the Tesla Model S, deliveries initially were very slow, weren't they? I mean, Mark, how many cars did we see in the first in your neck of the woods in San Francisco? How many cars did we see in that first few months?
Oh, they really dripped out. It was quite slow, and people were chomping at the bit, and we had lists so you could figure out when you were going to get your delivery. Obviously, that's very different now for the Leaf. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the i3. They're having a launch in San Francisco on Tuesday, and I'll get to finally actually drive the car during their test drives the following day.
Wow. Well, we've already had East Coast deliveries. The first East Coast delivery went to a professor in Boston, Massachusetts, and his wife. So congratulations to them. They were i3 EVs, not i3 Rex, because the i3 Rex hasn't yet been given its EPA fuel economy rating. So that means it can't be sold yet. Simple as that. So it's only i3 EVs. Our very own Michael Thwaite. We thought last week we were kind of being a bit cagey about deliveries because we got messages from Michael on Friday going, I think I'm going to be the first one in the country. And we were all ready, weren't we, Mark, for hey, Michael got the first car. Somebody else hit the first one. He must have been second, third, fourth in the country to get his i3. He's very pleased with it. He's very happy with it. And he was someone who wasn't kind of that keen on the i3 for quite a while, but now he's got it. He really enjoys it, really likes it. So congratulations, Michael. And the number of cars that are being delivered are in the hundreds. It's not just drip, drip, drip. It's in the hundreds. Do we prefer this launch? I mean, BMW cannot be flawed for its delivery of the vehicles once it actually had them. Leading up to delivery, BMW was abysmal about the whole thing. But now it's happening. It seems much better. Can we learn any lessons from this, guys? What do you think? Can we learn any lessons for Nissan when it brings out its next generation car, or maybe the ENV 200?
I think it's about keeping people informed. I mean, it always comes down to that, doesn't it? It always comes down to communication, and I don't know exactly what happened, but it seems that BMW was quite bad in the early part of the placing the order when people needed to place their order, by what they could have and what they couldn't have. Their communications around that was actually really ropey. And Nissan was relatively similar with deliveries when the Leaf first came out. I found out when my car was going to be delivered because I got a phone call and they said, oh, it's in the UK, you can get it this week. They didn't know up until the point where it appeared in the UK it was going to appear in the UK, which seems very odd to me.
And it certainly beats being told, oh, your car's on the way, oh, it's coming next week, oh, sorry, it's coming the week after, oh, sorry, it's the week after that.
Yes, but I mean, it shouldn't be difficult in today's day and age to go, there are these vehicles on this ship, which is here, it docks on this day. It shouldn't be difficult. So I'm guessing I just want communication from people.
So, Mark Geller, do you think BMW's set the bar a lot higher now?
Well, I certainly hope so. I'm not that familiar with what's going on with the BMW rollout here in California. I hope to find out more in the next week. I don't know what to say really about
Apparently,
BMW.
the first one was yesterday.
Yeah, that's what someone says in the chat room. I'm wondering who got that car.
I'm sure somebody important. Right, moving on to the third story of the segment. And this one revolves around government and politics. And this is one that, Mark, you wanted to talk about today in the show. So last week, we touched on this. Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg announced a programme in the UK, £500 million investment programme for EVs in the UK to help support people who wanted to buy them, to help support infrastructure, etc., etc. And then a few days later, as we kind of hinted last week, Nick Clegg went, yeah, but EVs are no good for me. No good for me. Now, we did kind of touch on it last week. We've talked about it a lot this week on Transport Evolved, so I don't want to talk necessarily about that element of the story, but it ties in really nicely, Mark Geller, with what you wanted to talk about, which is all around the world, governments seem to be spending huge amounts of money on EV incentives and EV programs, but they seem to be missing the really sensible, simple stuff.
Yeah, it does seem the case that often they're giving with one hand and taking away with the other. In some cases, giving rebates and then imposing extra taxes, such as has been done in Oregon and discussed in many states as ways to relieve the road tax issue, which certainly has to be dealt with at some point down the line, but it seems a little premature now. You're not going to get a good solution. And there are lots of simple ways that government could be very encouraging. We're hopefully making some strides in California, but it's not all clear yet. I mean, it's so evident to me that though it may not be the long-term solution, one of the things that the government as an employer can do is allow folks to plug in at work in a very simple way. Many of the places folks are driving to work at government locations, employees are finding outlets and then being told they can't do it. And a simple policy that makes it possible would, both encourage folks to get the cars, which I think we need to be clear is the most important task at the moment. It all hinges on getting folks to want to drive the cars. And very simple charging at work is one of the things that, even if folks don't need, is just an attractive incentive. And we are at the point now where we don't need to solve the problem for millions of cars on the road. We need to induce millions of cars on the road. And so I wish government would get it straight, what's sort of medium, long-term planning and hope for how it all shakes out with the questions of what can we do today to actually induce folks into the cars.
I think a lot of the problems here don't come from necessarily the people in charge, the top people, like the governors, the prime ministers, the presidents, the councillors, even Congress people. It comes from their staff. And I think this is illustrated very nicely with some of the political scandals that have been happening this year in the US. You have somebody who is supposedly an elected official who knows nothing about what's really going on. And I think maybe the challenge here, Mark, as you kind of hint there, is that there's this chain of command, but the people at the top are not necessarily hearing the right stuff because the people below them are either skeptical or misinformed or have their own prejudice that they put in place. And certainly in the UK, very much, if you want to be involved in politics, you either have to know somebody who knows somebody or knows somebody or goes to the right school, or you have to be really dogged and kick up a heck of a stink.
Yeah, it's certainly true that I think that, bureaucrats, broadly speaking, are fearful of doing something out of the box that they might be held responsible for. And in the case of electric cars, simply making those plugs available to some employees can become controversial. All it takes is one employee to say, okay, you should give me gasoline. So, yes. A direct message from the top can resolve a lot of that.
That's very true. I think maybe the challenge is wasn't there a case recently about a justice, like a judge in one of the districts in the US who was supposedly fined for plugging his car in because it was something to do with public funds, and how dare he plug in his his electric car and get that for electricity for free, etc., etc. He ended up coming out and saying, look, I've been paying for this all along. Maybe that's what someone needs to do. Maybe someone needs to sit down and write a policy that says, okay, we can let people plug in at work if you agree to have a reasonable deduction on your salary. And it could be, and it should be, the amount of electricity that you use.
Yeah, well, I mean, what it comes down to actually is, each location, each circumstance is going to be somewhat different. It would certainly be great if, you can put out a tin cup like you might do for the coffee and the donuts. It might be that some institution would like to institute a plan that involves deducting something through payroll. But the truth of the matter is that part of the reason to just sort of let people plug in to the mains and even put out some additional level 1 charging is that inevitably it is cheaper to do that, to actually offer it free for a while than it is to come up with any scheme for payments, or certainly a fair scheme.
Yep.
One that still induces people to drive EVs. The reality is we're talking about human nature.
Yeah.
Human nature likes stuff for free. In this case, offering for free actually costs less than a government agency trying to figure out how to collect 75 cents a day.
There's a challenge, though. There's your challenge as an advocate, and you know, in your work with Plug in America, is to make that case to a local government body who supports EVs to say, hey, we're going to be the first local government in the US to do this, to put aside a budget for electricity, and look how small the budget is. I mean, that would be the thing. Highlight all of the other things that they waste money on, and then go, and all of those on their own are worth less, are worth more than this tiny little bit of budget that you'd have to spend providing that 110 volt electricity.
Yes, and let me just say one more thing. The reality is that, of course, it's already happening at workplaces, public and private, where the employer or the facilities guy said, sure, go ahead. This seems to be like a good idea. We're going to have to deal with this. But they don't speak about it terribly publicly because there's no real advantage to advertising the fact that they're sort of making this simple and informal.
Maybe the challenge comes from the fact that when you're a private company, you've got your shareholders and maybe the C level to answer to. But when you are a government, you have your entire population to answer to. I think that's probably part of the problem. Mark Chatterley, what do you make of this all?
Well, I thought Mark made a very interesting point about the cost of coming up with a solution to charge people for electricity at work. And even if one person can come up with a system that is enforceable by them, which requires no ongoing effort, which is unlikely, and it takes them an hour to come up with that solution, that cost in an hour's salary is going to cover months and months and months of giving people free electricity.
Bingo.
So it really doesn't make sense to think about creating a system for any more than 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Otherwise, you've lost more money in thinking about the system, let alone setting it up and maintaining it, than you've ever lost from giving the electricity away.
I'm going to stop being my devil's advocate now, because I was at a meeting recently in Bristol where they set up a new green group, and they were talking about what Bristol City Council could do to make Bristol a greener place. And one of the things I said was, encourage multimodal transport and have parking, like park and ride sites on the outside of town, where every parking space has just a standard waterproof household outlet.
That's true. Very practical. That's exactly the point. I mean, the other problem, because I don't want to pin this solely on government mid-level bureaucrats afraid to act. It's also that as governments convene groups to study the problem and figure out a solution, significant stakeholders, and I'm assuming it's true in the UK and as it is in the United States, are the folks who hope to play in the arena of charging folks for electricity for electric cars. And so they are, in many cases, well financed with in all kinds of investor capital, and hopes to sort of corner the market on some level to make it de facto already true that there is a particular system to do this. And I think that, because most of the policymakers don't really know what it's like to have an electric car, or what is involved in plugging in at work versus the expense for an EVSE, and making all kinds of decisions around this now. There's a misunderstanding of what kind of simple, dumb solutions can offer us for the short term. Granted, there will need to be ways to deal with this, particularly in public, and obviously also at workplace. But we are at least a few years out from making those decisions. And I think it's presumptuous of us to think we know the technologies that will actually offer the best solutions when we get there with hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of cars on the road.
I think you're right. And Mark Chatterley, I'm sorry I cut you off.
No. That's completely good. I agree with everything that's been said, and I do think, and I know I have been criticised in the past, but I do think a car park with just normal sockets in it, assuming the power's in most modern multi-story car parks, because the kind of car parks I'm talking about are the ones in outlet centres, park and rides, those kind of places where you're going to spend more than 2-3 hours. It doesn't really matter if you're plugging into a 13 amp socket and only pulling 10 amps and only gaining 8 miles, 9 miles an hour. You're gaining something where you would not have gained anything. And if the choice is between them installing a 13 amp socket, which is nice and simple, or them finding a charging station provider, going down that route, putting it out to tender and just not doing it, I'd rather have a 13 amp socket.
Yeah, totally. All right, let's move on to our ad break. If you haven't yet seen our show, there is now an ad break, unless you're watching live, in which case there isn't. If you're watching on YouTube, there is one. If you're watching as a podcast, there isn't. But please do watch the ad because it helps us out. We'll be right back. On to part 2 of Transport Evolved for the 9th of May. We've got the wonderful Mark Geller joining myself and Mark Chatterley in the studio today. We are on to the next bit of the stories of today. Lots of stuff. Nissan ENV200 enters production, Mark.
It does, yes. They have officially started building it, which is actually quite impressive. So this is the Nissan minivan style thing that can have many different layouts. So you can have it as 3 seats in the front and a big cargo space, or as Nikki's quite excited about, with lots more seats, and it becomes a kind of people carrier type car. Maybe not quite a traditional people carrier, but that kind of styled car. Built with the exact same drivetrain as the Leaf. Gets slightly less range because it's a slightly bigger car, but it's by all accounts very, very cool, and I'm quite excited to see it. Mainly because we test drove the Renault Kangoo ZE, which is Renault's utility van, and we really liked that. Our issue with it was that it didn't have any form of rapid charging on it, whereas this, being built on the Leaf drivetrain, comes with a nice big chunky CHAdeMO socket, making it a lot more useful.
Which is awesome. Absolutely awesome. And you're
very
right.
Excited.
I am excited about it being a minivan and getting my kids and my dogs in it. And I'm hoping it's coming to the US. Mark Geller, do you share my optimism and hopes?
Well, I certainly share your hopes. I'm not sure if I share your optimism. It seems to me it's got to come here at some point. But it seems to me also that now would be a rather good time to expand their offerings. They're making the car. I guess they're making in Britain, a right-hand drive. I don't know where. I guess left-hand drive, or is it all being made in Barcelona?
It's all being made in Barcelona.
Oh, well, in which case they're definitely making left-hand drive cars, and I don't know, if what they feel is they must make that car in Tennessee, if it's going to be made for the American market. Who knows? But I would love to see that car available. I've seen the gasoline version. In fact, at a dealership, I saw a gasoline version that's the taxi version, fully decked out as a taxi, because apparently the deal with New York City for Nissan gas NV200 taxis as the taxi of the future has fallen through. And they're trying to get rid of the taxis at dealerships around the country. And that's a damn shame. But I would love to see the NV200. And I think it would find a great market in a lot of these places.
I think that it's a weird one because the car has not been, the van, the ENV200 or the NV200 hasn't really captured the market, as you suggest. And but I think it would be soccer mum fantastic. I know minivans have kind of lost their sheen to the SUV, but I think it's time they come back. Keep my fingers crossed. Mark, you're going to be driving one soon, aren't you?
I will. I just got confirmation through today, actually. So I'm going to go and test drive one, spend a day with it.
Yay!
Very, very excited about it. You're very, very jealous, which
I am.
is good.
Yeah. But I will be driving this. I'll be driving this. This Mr. Hero with all his stickers on.
We've got to, so it might be a bit of advance warning. The website itself might be a bit quiet for this sort of day and a half, 2-day period, as both me and Nikki are
out
not
of
in
the
UK.
country.
But we will try and find a way to at least put something up. I'm sure
we will do something. Fear not. All right, on to the next story. Tesla's 3rd gen EV is not going to be called the Model E. What's that about? Elon Musk has used the name Model E before in public, and responded to questions about the Model E. And Tesla trademarked the Model E name about a year ago, but now it's quietly dropped it. Dropped it at the end of April, almost as quietly as it picked it up. What do we think's going on, Mr. Geller?
Got me. I mean, it did seem logical, and certainly the notion that there would be an S, an E, and an X was a nice little
absolutely.
But who knows? Maybe they're going to come up with some new nomenclature. It's not the most important part of the process, but it's always fun to play with. Do you guys have any preferred names if they don't go with Model E?
I don't. Mark, do you have any?
I like the idea of a Model T. Because the Model T was Henry Ford's affordable, if that word applied, car. It was the car for the masses, the Model T, I believe. So it kind of makes sense for Tesla to borrow that. But I don't know. I kept on coming up with ideas like coil and things like that. But
okay,
we had big issues. Me and Nikki had a big discussion about how when you start getting gimmicky, you start alienating people. So I don't know. It'd be very interesting. I wonder if they dropped the trademark because there was some legal contention with Ford going on over Model E, wasn't there?
Was there?
I believe Ford tried to trademark Model E as well. This was maybe
that was what it was
4 or 5 months ago.
Maybe
I vaguely remember.
I've got our feedback here up on the Facebook page from the wonderful Christine Burns in the UK. Fantastic author and equal rights activist. She's brilliant. She listens to the show. And I commented the other day that I thought maybe we should start naming Teslas after famous people in electronics and science. And I commented about the 3 guys who invented the transistor. And she said, I think any of Shockley, Bardeen or Bretagne would be brilliant names for cars. A Crick or a Watson wouldn't sound quite right, but I could find room in my heart for a Chomsky or I can never pronounce it. I can't remember it. She said she'd drive... I'm not going to say it because I screwed up. But she said she would also drive a Lovelace, which I would drive a Lovelace. That would be awesome. Lady Lovelace. I've got a T-shirt with her. Sorry?
Shockley is going nowhere for at least 2.
No. That's true. That is true. All right, moving on then. Electric cars are safe. You can put your tinfoil hats away. Have you ever, Mark, you've been driving EVs longer than any of us here. Have you ever had anybody come up to you and go, oh, but it'll fry your brain?
It will fry my brain.
Yes,
no,
the electromagnetic radiation from the electric car motor will fry your brain, make you infertile, and cause, cancer.
I mean, certainly the EMF concern comes up, rears its head, all the time. It's the first question people ask, and I can't say that I didn't wonder if I should be sitting in my Think City charging, for an hour or 2 when I had to back in the day, and wondering if I really should be sitting there and reading on, right on top of all of this electronics. But I've come to be convinced that, we have had electricity in very close proximity to our private bits and whatnot for a very long time. And the evidence is just not there as far as I know. And I'm obviously incapable by education of making a judgment that's based in science. It's a question of seeing what scientists generally have found to be true. It's like global warming. I mean, global warming is happening because there's scientific evidence, and there just doesn't seem to be, as far as I know, scientific evidence that we should be concerned about EMFs frying our brains. even when we're sitting in the car, putting,
huge amounts of power in.
Huge amounts of power in. It's just irrelevant.
And we're surrounded by radiation all the time. Radiation passes through our body right this second.
Yeah, and I mean, it's non-ionizing radiation. It's electromagnetic radiation, so it's not dangerous, and it isn't that much. I mean, we still aren't talking about massive amounts of radiation. There is more coming out of substations. I used to live in a block of flats that had its own substation because it was on a sort of new build-ish area down in Cardiff, and so it was built right next to a substation. That probably had way more EM radiation come off it than the car would. If you live near a broadcasting mast, that's probably got more coming off of it than your motor does. It's all rubbish. It's all just it's new, and therefore it has to be a concern. And it's like those people who think they're allergic to Wi-Fi waves, and every study that's ever been in it has shown that it's a psychosomatic reaction to them seeing blinking lights. And it's just I get actually quite frustrated and annoyed at this, because it's something we know is patently false, but this study had to go ahead because enough people complained about it and were concerned about it, whereas there was enough evidence already to come to the decision that the study has come to.
7 countries funded this in the EU to try and figure out, but EMF in electric cars is not a cause of concern. Radiation levels from motors and power electronics are 1/5 of considered safe limits for non-ionizing radiation, as Mark said. So there really is nothing to worry about. And you do have more radiation in many more conditions, in many more situations. One of which, for example, different type of radiation from tanning salons. The rise in tanning salons in the UK is going through the roof. You're going to hurt yourself more going to a tanning salon than you are driving there on your EV. So don't tan. Drive your EV instead. Or get out. Get a healthy suntan with, the appropriate factor whatever on. That's the way to do it. All right. So, we don't need to be paranoid. There's another break, and we will be right back with EV Wars Part 2. Except this is Part 3. I meant EV Wars Part 2 in Part 3. I just wanted to clarify that. Welcome to Part 3. We've got... Can you tell I was up at 4:50 this morning, Mark?
Yeah, a little bit.
Just a little bit. I was up at 4:50 filming.
Well, that's insane. You're silly.
My devotion to the cause. All right. After doing battle in New Jersey, Tesla is now having to do battle in my wife's home state of Missouri. And unfortunately, Missouri is not kind of the place where you would necessarily think of as being pro-Tesla. Politically, Missouri, it used to be kind of a fairly even balanced state, but these days it's getting more and more red, more and more conservative. And at the very last minute, in the last week of the current session, an amendment to a bill has been passed from the lower house to the upper house, which will mean, if it's passed, that Tesla won't be able to sell direct to customers in the state of Missouri. What on earth is going on there? Now, we do have, before anybody says, I know that I think EVTV is based in Missouri, isn't it? And a couple of other big names in the EV world are based in Missouri. I'm acknowledging they exist, and that they do fantastic things, and that means that EVs and Missouri do exist. But in general, a lot of people in Missouri kind of don't like EVs because they're suspicious of them, etc., etc., etc. Mark Geller, what's going on?
Well, here we go again. I mean, I think that there are, it's no surprise, powerful forces who are arrayed against electric vehicles, and powerful trade associations that have come to exist historically for reasons that we've discussed when we discussed New Jersey, and we're just going to have to plow through it. Embarrassing these states. I think the one thing that we've got with electric cars, particularly as part of the climate change discussion, is that they are very appealing to both, in the form of the Tesla, to wealthy people, and this fight to allow Tesla to be sold is very appealing to libertarians and often Republicans, and so they are quite torn, perhaps, by which direction to go. But in the end, their free market impulses generally win out. So we have allies on the Tesla struggle that sometimes we don't have. But clearly, this is, there are industries that are arrayed against this, and Tesla can use all the support it can get. Plug in America certainly will mobilize whatever supporters we've got in these states as these issues come up. It's going to be a knockdown drag out until perhaps it comes to the Supreme Court, if it comes to that. And
I think it will.
And if it does, who knows in what guise and what repercussions could flow from that we might not be so thrilled with. But,
given the current incumbents, is probably the best way of putting it, at the Supreme Court, I cannot see Tesla losing. I think I'm going to go out and say that. Because, to mandate a particular... to mandate that dealers operate and sell cars direct to consumers and nobody else can is essentially creating the exact monopoly that the auto dealer associations were put in place to try and tackle in the first place. It makes no sense. Mark, do we ever think this is ever going to happen in the UK?
Anti-Tesla legislation? No, because we don't have that same infrastructure for selling cars.
No, we don't.
Over here.
But we do have lots of people who are very unhappy about electric cars and Tesla in general.
I can't imagine it would be anything specific to Tesla then. I could see possibly them legislating lots of silly little things, like we've already got the noise emitters having to be a certain level, and I can see them trying to make EVs and plug-in hybrids undesirable because of all these little bits of legislation, which make it to the point where manufacturers start going, is there any point in us building these cars anymore? But that's quite a paranoid mindset to be in, and I would hope, and I think I'm right in saying that at the moment in the UK at least, EVs aren't seen as a threat, plug-in cars aren't seen as a threat, and by the time they become a threat, they'll be too far advanced. We're kind of doing EV stealth over here.
EV stealth, I like that. EV stealth, activate. All right, Nissan for some time has been doing this. Well, would you like this nice Nissan Leaf with 150 miles of range? I don't know why I've kind of gone into a quasi Cartman voice there, but that's just the way I did it. Nissan asking about long-range cars, and a lot of people going, yeah, I quite actually like a Nissan Leaf with 150 miles. This week, news surfaced that Andy Palmer, one of the big boss guys at Nissan, he's in charge of product planning, isn't he, at Nissan? He came out and said, essentially, next generation Leaf and Infinity's first plug-in car will use an all-new battery technology, which is really much more energy dense than current battery technologies. And what does that mean, Mr. Chatterley?
It means we can go further.
Yeah.
Or do you actually want a more technical
Go on, give us a technical description.
So it basically means you can pack more energy into a given unit of mass. So if you have 1 kilogram of the old battery technology, it will hold, pick a number, half a kilowatt hour out of the air. 1 kilogram of the new battery technology may be able to double that and hold 1 kilowatt hour. And so for the same weight, you can get extra power, which extra storage, energy, however you want to describe it, is awesome, is what we want.
So it's actually, it means that you can either choose, you make your battery pack smaller, which means your cars can be smaller and lighter for a given energy storage amount, or you can make your battery packs store more energy, which means your car will go further. And Andy Palmer this week went on the record talking with Automotive News to say, look, our next generation cars will include this technology. He wouldn't say when that was going to be, but there were hints that 2017 will be the date that we'll see them come to market. And interestingly, he also said that range would need to be at least 300 kilometers or 186 miles in order to compete against some of the hydrogen cars that people like Honda and Toyota are planning to bring to market.
But interestingly, that's less than double of what it is now if you go by certain measuring.
I would still go for it. What do you think, Mark Geller?
Well, I think it's with the direction we want them to head in. The sooner the better. I think that they're right that there is a great market for cars of about the range that the Leaf has now, and that hopefully this battery technology improvement means that those cars will simply be cheaper, and that you could perhaps even someday use fewer, less volume of batteries and still go that same, kind of excellent commute range. And folks who want more can get more. It was very interesting that the Infinity got sort of revived in that conversation. As perhaps the place where they'll first release the longer range car, and which it certainly makes sense. The Infinity should inevitably be somewhat more luxurious and probably a bit more profitable for Nissan. I certainly hope that there are some things they're not going to carry over from their concept version, where they seem to place great faith in the notion that inductive charging coming standard with that car would be an important distinguisher for the brand. And I think it's a complete wasted effort. Not that someone who might want that shouldn't be able to get it, but to embed another few $1,000s of cost into the car is just not what a car, whether it's a mainstream, economy car or a luxury car, can bear. I mean, a few $1,000s off the cost and price it serves a greater purpose than throwing the supposed sexiness of inductive charging on.
Mr. Chatterley, what do you think
about inductive charging?
Yes, no, and the battery pack.
I hope they do it. I think you're right. It keeps coming down to this argument I keep having about the perceived need versus actual need, and to sell a product you have to cater to perceived need, not actual need. And where Nissan is at the moment is they've got a product that works very much with actual need. Most people can make do, and most people, it's not even make do, most people can live their lives with a current generation Leaf, but that's not what people perceive they need, and that's why they're not selling as many as they would like. So make one that can go further. It starts encroaching on more people's perceived need, and that's what we want. As for inductive charging, it's a ridiculous idea that's never going to take off.
It will take off because governments are spending lots of money on it. Like, I mean, this is exactly the point we were talking about. This is kind of not a circle conversation per se, but this goes very far back into the earlier conversation we had about governments not knowing what they're doing.
Well, yeah, but I don't think a government, just because the government's backing it, is going to take off. I honestly do not think, seeming the only standard we have for inductive charging at the moment tops out at 7 kilowatts. That's ridiculous. And to put it in the roads, which is kind of the sensible place to put it, it would require an infrastructure update program which would last far longer than any government has in power, even if they go for a double term. So they won't likely support that. So then you're down to inductive charging in your driveway. Well, what's the point in having it in my driveway? You're going to have to dig up my driveway to stick this thing in. I might as well just plug in. So then you're back to off-road parking. Okay, you could put it for off-road parking, but the problem with that is you've got to dig up all the roads. That's massive infrastructure. Again, you're back to the infrastructure problem. I don't think there's any way you will ever get inductive charging to actually work and happen in the real world because of the investment in time that's needed for it.
There we go.
Yeah, just to be fair to the inductive charging folks, I mean, I think certainly in terms of for home use, they're not talking about something that would require, digging up your garage or driveway. They've got pads, and it won't be that terrible. But any
so you have a pad with a wire trailing.
I guess. I mean, it's just it's absurd. But as long as we're picking on one dumb Nissan thought, which may well still survive, I would also say that the notion that Mr. Palmer put out, that about 180 miles, or is that what we were talking about?
186.
Is placing the bar too high. I mean, I think that what car companies and the public policy people have all been surprised to find over time is that their belief that a battery-powered car needs to match a gasoline car in range proved not true. In other words, back 15 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it was, they were attributing the failure of EVs in California during the previous round to the fact that it wasn't a 300-mile range car. And they said, until the batteries can do that, nothing's going to happen. Well, here we are, and we've got, I don't know, is it 5, 6, 7 car companies with sub 100-mile range cars that are, selling in the tens of thousands. I mean, there's clearly a market. And I think that, the truth is the sweet spot is somewhere more like 125 to 150 miles with fast charging, because most people really, I suspect, aren't going to be willing to pay for the batteries to make the cars truly long range unless, the costs come way down. So, I think it's just they need a slightly more practical car, which is, not 200, not 180 miles. It's more like 125 or 150 with fast charging.
Yeah, I would say my kind of goal is to have a car that does 100 miles or 120 miles always. Whatever the situation, it will always do that as a minimum. And I think we should start designing EVs with minimum ranges rather than best optimal ranges, and we should start selling them with minimal ranges, or at least, stop saying that they'll do 80 to 100 miles when they really don't, in a lot of cases. Let's move on to the next story. Toyota doesn't really like electric cars. Who wants to talk about this? Do you know what the proven way is, Mr. Chatterley?
The proven way, it's horse and cart and walking.
Of course, absolutely. Mark, what's your proven way?
My proven way?
Yes.
Bicycle.
Yes, there you go. Well, according to Lexus, the proven way is its new range of brand new luxury hybrid vehicles. Not electric cars, because, they're slow and boring and they take forever to charge up. This is the latest ad from Lexus, and it really goes for the jugular, specifically against the Nissan Leaf. Now, this ad starts off by showing what looks at first glance to be an AeroVironment DC quick charge station, although on closer examination, it's revealed to actually be a Type 1 or Type 2 charging station with a J1772 plug. And we assume it's
level
a
1 or level 2.
Level 2. And we assume that it says a level 2 because they then say, the average charge time for an EV is 4 hours. And they show this car being plugged in and this timer ticking down with the empty battery. And the voiceover that accompanies it is so arrogant, isn't it, Mr. Chatterley? Do you have that to hand?
The language, the only phrase I can remember is that it was on the static image they had, which was a shot of that charging station, and it just said, for people who have 4 hours to waste.
Oh, here we go. While some are content to spend hours waiting at a charging station or driving in search of alternative fuel, we define progress differently. The whole concept that the EVs are not progressing, and that Lexus hybrids are, because they're now on their 6th generation. And they get this. They did this in such a proud way. It's a bit like when your kid comes to you and they go, "Look, mummy, look what I did." And it's this pile of stuff and you have no idea what it is. But you don't want to hurt their feelings. And you go, "Sweetheart, that's gorgeous. Can I put that on my fridge?" I've done that as well. It was a bit like that because they go, "We can get 42 miles to the gallon. Wow."
That's a lot.
Anyway, this ad really really takes on the Nissan Leaf head on. And it makes Lexus and Toyota out to be complete and utter buffoons. Because there's just so much misinformation in this ad and so many false illusions and so many stereotypes pandered to that even those who don't know about EVs have said to me, "That's not true, is it?" Mark Geller, what do you make of this all?
Oh, it's pathetic. I mean, I don't think there's probably, I don't know. Maybe this is really part of the Toyota campaign. Maybe it's just a bunch of people assigned a job one day saying, make an ad that shows the benefits of our gas car over I don't know. I don't think these things have tremendous impact. It's fun to smack them down when they're so obviously just wrong and spreading misinformation. And it's useful in that it reaffirms what we often say, which is that, you know, Toyota is not in the game. Toyota is not about the success of plug-in cars, and that's a shame.
Yeah, I'm just reading.
It's bitterness, I think, because they missed the boat. They were perfectly poised off of the back of the Prius to launch a plug-in Prius. They even had the community show them the way and give them the technology.
They even made the plug-in Prius for years.
Exactly. Yeah, so they had this handed to them, and then they, for some reason, didn't do it, didn't look into it, thought they could maintain the hybrid status quo, and what they should have been doing was pushing and innovating with what essentially was a gift from people who love their cars. And I think they're now bitter that they've missed this chance.
What you have to understand about Toyota, though, is Toyota has always tried to play this catch-up game. The only reason why Toyota went into hybrids in the first place, along with Honda, I might add, is because which year was it, Mark? It was under Clinton, wasn't it?
Yeah, during the
Clinton administration. There was a big push by Clinton, and of course his vice president, to push hybrid vehicles. And GM and Ford, they all came out and went, "We're going to make a hybrid car. Look at us, we're making hybrid cars." And and Toyota, and to some extent Nissan and Honda all got scared. And they started working really, really, really hard on hybrid drivetrain technology. And then GM and Ford went, you know what? Nah, it's all right. We don't need to anymore.
Yeah, they took the federal money and didn't really produce the goods. And Toyota was scared because it had a vision of itself as the leading automaker in many ways, and we're going to pursue that strategy. I think you're right that, you know, had they had the vision and gumption to do an all-electric version of the Prius, it would have been very interesting. I mean, it would have been I'm sure somewhere there is a Toyota Skunk Works with various versions of an all-electric Prius, and it would have been very interesting to have seen that on the market with the regular Prius and the plug-in Prius. But here we are. That's not the path.
I also think Toyota's bitter about the RAV4. The first gen and what happened. We're not going to revisit that. All right, so this is our and finally the concept of electric cars operating in the countryside, the concept of electric cars being used as taxi cabs. Even though there are now taxi cab fleets all around the world that use EVs, and there are people all around the world who live in the country and drive EVs, Mark is one of them, generally the consensus is EVs don't mix in the country. They're low speed, low range vehicles. You only use them in the cities. But this week, a company in St Austell in Cornwall celebrated 12 months of ownership of a Nissan Leaf. Since they've purchased their first car, they have moved to 5 cars in total. They have a DC quick charging station at their depot where they send the cars out from. They've saved, wait for it, an estimated £40,000 in fuel. How much is that in dollars? It's about $60,000, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah. And this is the interesting thing. They've got a couple of diesel cars that they've kind of kept on the side for the really, really long distance fares. They generally only deal with people in and around their local town. But most of the trips are capable in the Leaf. They do 40-mile trips, so 80-mile round trips in the Leaf. They just charge when they get back to the depot and they're good to go again. These cars are operating sort of 7 till midnight, 7 days a week. It's phenomenal. And 150,000 miles in a Leafs, in their combined Leafs and the fleet. That's brilliant, isn't it? Why aren't more people doing this?
It's an important story, actually. Am I jumping in too soon? It was an important story because, you know, I think that the car makers and the government, not to pick and, place a lot of faith on big solutions moving lots of people. So they try and enter into negotiations with a city or a big company in a city to do taxi cab fleets. And I've been one of the first to say I think that it's a mistake to kind of try and push into the urban taxi cab market because of the way, for all kinds of reasons, in the way they're used, even though it certainly could work. But here's an example where out of the box, and I don't know if these folks decided on their own this seemed to make sense, or if there was a government program that gave them the opportunity, but it's counterintuitive and important to understand. Here we've got a case where a fairly rural, I guess, location has a taxi company, and in fact, strangely, it's if you statistically analyze what they're doing, where they're going, how often they need to turn over all that stuff, it's a really good match for part of their fleet being EVs.
Yeah.
And they quickly learn how much it benefits them to use them in place of the diesel car. So
the population is about 35,000 of this town, of St Austell. So it's not a big town. It might be a big town by Southwest standards, but it's not a big town. It's a fairly small town by all accounts. I mean, in the US, that would be a small town, right, Mark?
Sure. But, a town of that size, may have a taxi service. Certainly cities of, 100,000 do. And they're strapped because gasoline is driving them crazy. It's as for the employee of some company who's not going to get a big, is not going to get a raise, because that's just not happening in American companies now. The way you give yourself a raise is by not having to pay $300 or $400 a month in gasoline.
Yeah. And the other important thing to note here is that they've said, CNC Taxis has said that it's actually increased its business by having EVs. All of the local hotels, for example, have started to use them as their preferred taxi service because they really like the kudos of sending their clients to the airport or to the train station or whatever in an EV. And a lot of and some hotels have even got to asking, when someone asks for a taxi, would you like an electric car or a petrol car or a diesel car? And when they ask, or they say, okay, I'll have an electric car, they then say, well, would you like a Nissan Leaf? And at that point, that person who's staying at the hotel gets educated. They might have their very first EV experience. They go home. They then maybe take a test drive. It's the perfect evangelizing opportunity for EVs. What do you make of it, Mr. Chatterley?
I really like it. I hope it's the first of many. We know there's that company in Amsterdam that does Leaf taxis, and they're getting some ENV 200s as well to use as taxis. I do honestly think that it will become the norm in city centres for taxi companies to start using EVs, especially as the price starts to drop over the next couple of years, because there isn't an excuse now. Even luxury taxi companies, there are luxury EVs on the market. So I think it totally makes sense that these things will happen, because it just saves them so much money and maintenance cost.
Fantastic.
I'm pretty sure there must be lots of Tesla taxis in Oslo.
Well, there's going to be a whole new fleet in Amsterdam as well soon as well. So it's coming. That really is it for today's show. Thank you very much for joining me today, Mr. Geller. Where can people find you?
They can find me at plugsandcars.blogspot.com and at pluginamerica.org.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining me today and joining Mark today. I just used the lower third, probably for the last time ever, the old lower third, because we're going to try and get the new ones up for next week. Ooh. Although Mark doesn't know this yet, and he's the one who I'm going to ask to make them.
Yeah, I did make a mental note of how rude that was.
We're going to use that for the very last time. Have I asked you already?
No, I kind of knew it was coming.
We're going to do it. Guess what next week is, guys?
It's next week.
It's our bicentenary episode.
Wow.
Yay!
Do we have any special guests?
We do. We're not going to say who it is, though.
We have special guest. We have special guest.
I think we have a special guest.
We think we have a special guest.
Anyway, that really is it, folks. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on all kinds of other places. Stitcher, everywhere that does podcasts and whatnot. You can subscribe to us directly through our website, or you can just watch us on YouTube. But either way, please subscribe, because we just like that warm, fuzzy feeling we get when we get new subscribers. We'll be providing the very best in EV news and reviews and discussion next week. And tomorrow, as a special treat, I'm going to be going for a very long drive in my Nissan Leaf with my co-driver and photographer, Adam. And my car is sitting on my driveway right now full of camping gear because we're going to basically fill up the car as if we were off to Wave tomorrow and drive it because of, all the extra weight and see what that happens. And we're going to go down to deepest, darkest southwest of England or over the bridge into Wales and up some mountains to see, how we get on. So we'll be tweeting and doing various things tomorrow. So keep up to date. Follow us on Twitter and you won't lose anything. That really is it, folks. Thanks for joining us. And as always, don't forget to plug in. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.